Today, we're diving into the shocking history of toothpaste. And yes, the Romans once cleaned their teeth with urine. In the vast expanse of the Roman Empire, where monumental achievements and conquests often overshadow the ordinary aspects of daily life, the humble practices of ordinary citizens frequently went unnoticed. Among these overlooked customs was the meticulous attention Romans paid to oral hygiene. While it might seem trivial today, for many Romans, maintaining clean teeth was an essential part of their daily routine. The earliest evidence of dental care in Rome dates back to the pre-Republican era, when small communities along the Tiber River began adopting practices influenced by Etruscan and Greek traditions. Archaeological discoveries reveal rudimentary toothbrushes, primarily made of twigs with frayed ends, which were used to scrub teeth. These implements, though primitive, suggest that Romans understood the importance of removing food particles and maintaining some degree of oral cleanliness. However, it was not only the physical act of cleaning that intrigued them. Romans were obsessed with whitening teeth, an obsession that might seem odd considering the absence of modern dental products. Their desire for a bright, gleaming smile led to the experimentation with various substances. Crushed bones, oyster shells, and even powdered charcoal were used as abrasive materials to scrub teeth. Such practices were the precursors to more peculiar methods that would emerge in later centuries. By the 1st century BCE, as Rome expanded into new territories, cultural exchanges introduced novel ideas. Wealthy citizens, always keen to display sophistication and refinement, sought ingredients that promised superior results. Among these, human urine became an unlikely but highly valued component. Though it may seem repulsive to the modern mind, urine contains ammonia, a natural cleansing agent. Ancient texts, including writings by Roman scholars like Pliny the Elder, describe the use of urine for whitening teeth, emphasizing its effectiveness over more conventional substances. The practice was not limited to the elite. In fact, urine was readily available and inexpensive, making it accessible to a broader population. Romans would collect urine from public urinals, which were common in cities, and use it as part of a daily tooth-cleaning ritual. This mundane aspect of daily life, however, was intertwined with social norms and etiquette. The process of cleaning one's teeth with urine was discreet, and discussions of such practices were often avoided in polite conversation, despite their prevalence. Dental hygiene also intersected with other aspects of Roman medicine and health. The Roman medical practitioner Scribonius Largus, for instance, documented remedies that included gargling and rinsing with various solutions. While some of these were based on superstition or anecdotal evidence, others reflected empirical observation. The inclusion of urine in oral care exemplified this blend of practical knowledge and cultural acceptance. Interestingly, despite the widespread use of urine, it was not always employed in its pure form. Some sources indicate that it was mixed with other ingredients, such as ashes or powdered herbs, to improve texture or mask odor. This combination highlights the Romans' ingenuity and willingness to experiment, even in the seemingly trivial domain of dental hygiene. Moreover, the significance of clean teeth extended beyond health or aesthetics. In Roman society, personal appearance and hygiene were closely linked to social status. A person with a clean, white smile could command greater respect and demonstrate refinement. Conversely, poor dental care could signify negligence or lower social standing. Thus, even an unpleasant substance like urine gained acceptance because it served a socially meaningful purpose. The process itself, while simple in description, involved a series of careful steps. Romans would first rinse the mouth with water to remove loose debris. The cleaning agent, often powdered or liquid urine, would then be applied using a small stick, cloth, or finger. This would be followed by additional rinsing to remove residual taste. For the wealthy, attendants might assist in these routines, ensuring thorough cleaning and adherence to social expectations. Over time, these practices became codified within Roman households. Manuals on domestic management, such as those attributed to Columella and other authors, contain references to oral care and hygiene. While the texts often focus on agricultural or culinary matters, occasional mentions of personal care reveal a surprisingly detailed understanding of daily routines. These mundane references provide historians with valuable insight into the rhythms of Roman domestic life. Despite the extensive documentation, the modern perception of these practices often lean toward amusement or disgust. Yet, from a historical standpoint, the use of urine reflects broader patterns of Roman pragmatism. The empire's citizens were adept at utilizing available resources, blending tradition with practical experimentation. Even an unconventional substance like urine was integrated into daily life because it served a tangible purpose. By examining these early practices, one gains a window into the priorities, beliefs, and social norms of ancient Rome. The focus on dental care, though seemingly trivial, illustrates the interplay between science, culture, and daily life. It also underscores the fact that even in one of history's most renowned civilizations, the ordinary concerns of citizens, such as clean teeth, were intertwined with broader social and cultural expectations. As we move forward, the story of Roman oral hygiene will reveal not only the persistence of unconventional methods, but also the gradual evolution of personal care practices. The use of urine, initially practical and socially accepted, eventually became a defining feature of daily routines, influencing generations and leaving an indelible mark on the history of hygiene. As the Roman Empire grew in size and complexity, spanning vast territories from the cold hills of Britain to the sun-drenched lands of Egypt, so too did the practices and habits of its citizens. Oral hygiene, though seemingly a minor aspect of daily life, reflected the diversity and adaptability of Roman culture. What may have begun as a simple routine in the city of Rome gradually evolved as it spread throughout the empire, influenced by local customs, available resources, and the social expectations of regional populations. In the northern provinces, such as Gaul and Germania, the materials available for dental care differed considerably from those in Rome itself. Tooth cleaning twigs were often harvested from native trees, and abrasives consisted of crushed shells, sand, or volcanic stones. While the use of urine remained known, its practical implementation varied. Some northern communities preferred to ferment it slightly, believing that aged urine had superior whitening properties. Though this notion seems odd by modern standards, it illustrates how Roman practices were adapted to fit regional resources and local beliefs. In contrast, Mediterranean provinces such as Greece and Egypt exhibited more influence from local traditions and ancient medical theories. Greek texts had long discussed the concept of bodily humors and their influence on health, and these ideas were integrated into Roman approaches to hygiene. For example, some physicians recommended combining urine with powdered herbs or fragrant oils, not only for cleaning, but also to counteract the odor. Egyptians, accustomed to the use of natron for various cleaning purposes, occasionally incorporated it into dental regimens, blending Roman and local methods. The trade networks of the empire facilitated the dissemination of unusual ingredients, allowing even remote regions access to substances previously unavailable. Traders and merchants brought shells, charcoal, and exotic herbs from across the Mediterranean, enriching the variety of dental cleaning techniques. Yet, despite this diversity, the fundamental practice of using urine remained widespread, largely because of its effectiveness and universal availability. Social status continued to play a major role in the application of these methods. Wealthy Romans in provincial cities maintained large households staffed with attendants whose duties included assisting with personal hygiene. The process of teeth cleaning, while monotonous in itself, became a subtle demonstration of wealth and refinement. A citizen with a well-maintained smile could convey sophistication and respectability, particularly in interactions with peers or in public forums. In smaller towns and rural villages, however, the practice remained a personal responsibility. Farmers, artisans, and merchants followed simpler routines, but still adhered to the broader cultural expectation of maintaining clean teeth. Interestingly, regional variations also influenced the tools used. In Italy, slender sticks with frayed ends remained common, whereas in the northern territories, citizens sometimes used animal hair bristles attached to small wooden handles. These early toothbrushes were crude by modern standards, but they were functional. In Egypt, clay tablets with shallow grooves served as rudimentary scrapers for teeth, demonstrating a more innovative approach to the same goal. Regardless of the method, the underlying principle remained the same: removal of debris and application of a cleaning agent, often including the infamous urine. The daily routines of Roman citizens were structured around these practices. Morning and evening teeth cleaning became a habitual ritual, often performed before and after meals. Families would gather in private spaces, ensuring a degree of privacy and modesty. In elite households, attendants oversaw the process, meticulously applying cleaning agents and ensuring that teeth were whitened effectively. Even minor deviations from the standard routine were noted, as oral hygiene was tied to notions of discipline, civility, and self-respect. Roman medical literature continued to document these practices with a remarkable level of detail. Scribonius Largus, Columella, and other writers emphasized the importance of cleanliness and proper technique. Instructions often included precise measurements of cleaning agents, suggested duration of scrubbing, and recommendations for post-cleaning rinses. These writings reveal a society that, while often obsessed with grandeur and conquest, paid careful attention to the minutiae of everyday life. Yet, as the empire grew, practical considerations often dictated the evolution of these habits. Urban centers faced shortages of certain materials, leading to experimentation with alternatives. Farmers and laborers adapted routines to their daily schedules, sometimes shortening or simplifying procedures. In some regions, communal facilities, such as public baths, included spaces for personal care. Here, citizens could access water, implements, and cleaning agents, making the process more efficient but also more social. The spread of Roman oral hygiene practices also reflected the empire's broader strategy of cultural integration. Conquered peoples were gradually introduced to Roman customs, from architecture and law to culinary habits and personal care. Local populations often adopted these practices selectively, blending them with existing traditions. In Gaul, for instance, indigenous herbal remedies were combined with Roman techniques, creating hybrid routines that differed from those in Italy. In Britain, citizens adapted cleaning agents to local materials, while retaining the principle of whitening teeth using ammonia-rich substances. Furthermore, archaeological evidence supports the idea that dental care had a symbolic dimension. Objects related to teeth cleaning, such as small brushes, containers for cleaning agents, and vessels for urine, have been discovered in domestic contexts, sometimes accompanied by inscriptions or decorative motifs. These findings suggest that oral hygiene was not merely functional, but also carried social and cultural significance. The emphasis on clean teeth reflected broader concerns with appearance, reputation, and integration into the civic life of the empire. By the end of the 1st century CE, regional differences had solidified into recognizable patterns. Northern territories emphasized practical, utilitarian methods using locally sourced materials, while Mediterranean regions integrated refinement, exotic substances, and more elaborate rituals. Across all regions, however, the use of urine persisted as a central component, underscoring its perceived effectiveness and the Roman willingness to embrace unconventional methods in pursuit of cleanliness and social propriety. The study of these practices provides insight into the ordinary lives of Roman citizens, often overshadowed by political, military, and architectural achievements. The detailed attention to dental hygiene reveals a society concerned not only with grandeur, but also with everyday functionality, social perception, and practical problem solving.
While many historical records focus on the practices of the general populace or elite households in abstract terms, some rare sources offer glimpses into the personal experiences of Romans themselves. Letters, household notes, and informal writings reveal how individuals approached dental care and the role it played in daily life. Though these records are limited and often fragmentary, they provide valuable insight into the mundane routines that shaped the experience of ancient Roman citizens. In the city of Rome, a middle-class merchant named Gaius Maximus left behind a collection of letters addressed to friends and family. Among his discussions of trade and political events, he occasionally mentioned minor domestic matters, including his oral hygiene routine. Gaius described waking before dawn, as was customary, and preparing a small clay dish with a powdered mixture of shells and herbs. To this, he added a measured amount of urine collected from the household's container, then stirred the mixture with a small wooden spatula. He would carefully apply this mixture to his teeth, noting that a thorough scrubbing could take several minutes, especially before attending the forum where he would meet clients and peers. Gaius's letters emphasize that the process was far from pleasurable. He often lamented the unpleasant taste and the lingering odor, describing it as the bitter necessity of a respectable appearance. Yet, despite his discomfort, he followed the routine daily, highlighting the social expectations that underpinned Roman hygiene practices. Clean teeth, he believed, were as essential as a well-groomed appearance or properly maintained clothing, particularly for those engaged in commerce and public life. In wealthier households, the routine could be more elaborate. Some elite Romans employed personal attendants, often slaves or servants, trained to assist with hygiene. These attendants oversaw the preparation of cleaning mixtures, the proper application to teeth, and the maintenance of associated utensils. For instance, Calemala, a writer on domestic matters, notes that large households maintained small containers specifically for toothpaste ingredients, often keeping them in cool, dry areas to preserve effectiveness. The attention to detail underscores the cultural importance of oral hygiene among those with means. In contrast, ordinary citizens without attendants relied on simpler, self-administered methods. Farmers, artisans, and soldiers adapted available materials to meet their needs. Twigs from local trees, crushed shells, and common herbs were combined with urine in small clay or wooden vessels. Although less refined, these methods were consistent with broader social expectations, reflecting the pervasive importance of clean teeth in Roman culture. The act of preparing and applying these mixtures became integrated into daily life, a task as routine as bathing or dressing. Interestingly, some personal anecdotes suggest that Romans were aware of both the benefits and risks of these practices. Letters from certain individuals caution against overuse of abrasive materials, noting that excessive scrubbing could damage gums and wear down teeth. Others recommended frequent rinsing to remove unpleasant residues or the addition of aromatic herbs to mitigate odor. These insights reveal a practical understanding of hygiene that balanced effectiveness with caution, even in the absence of modern scientific knowledge. Household records also indicate that oral hygiene intersected with diet. Romans recognized that certain foods contributed to staining or decay, while others could naturally aid cleanliness. Crusty bread, for instance, served as a rudimentary abrasive, helping to remove surface debris. Fruits and vegetables were valued not only for nutrition, but also for their ability to cleanse teeth through fibrous texture. These dietary considerations were often noted in personal diaries and household logs, suggesting an integrated approach to health and appearance. In addition to personal letters and records, inscriptions on tombs and monuments occasionally reference hygiene habits, though indirectly. One epitaph from the outskirts of Pompeii mentions a citizen's meticulous attention to cleanliness, including care of the body and teeth, as a mark of virtuous living. Such references highlight the moral and cultural dimensions attached to daily routines, illustrating that hygiene was perceived as both a practical and ethical concern. Medical texts from the period complement these personal accounts. Scribonius Largus, a Roman physician, emphasized that consistent oral care could prevent broader health issues. While his writings often mix empirical observation with superstition, they reflect a concern for the relationship between dental health and general well-being. Recommendations included not only cleaning teeth with mixtures containing urine, herbs, and abrasives, but also monitoring diet and avoiding certain foods. These texts reinforce the idea that oral hygiene was recognized as a significant, ongoing responsibility, not merely a cosmetic practice. Despite the meticulous routines, there were occasional social challenges. Public spaces such as baths and latrines could complicate hygiene, as communal containers of urine and water were not always sanitary. Romans adapted by designating private vessels for household use, particularly in urban apartments where access to fresh water was limited. The careful management of these materials demonstrates both ingenuity and the practical constraints of urban life. Stories from soldiers stationed on the empire's frontiers further illustrate adaptation under challenging conditions. Legionaries in Britain or along the Rhine sometimes lacked access to traditional ingredients. They improvised using locally available materials, combining crushed shells, ash, and urine when accessible, or simply using abrasive twigs when other options were unavailable. Despite hardships, letters from officers note that soldiers who maintained clean teeth were perceived more favorably both by peers and commanders, reinforcing the social significance of oral hygiene even in military contexts. Children and youth also participated in these routines, though often under supervision. Household manuals recommend teaching young citizens proper techniques from an early age, ensuring that habits of cleanliness became ingrained. The process served not only to preserve dental health, but also to instill discipline and adherence to societal norms. In this sense, oral hygiene was as much a tool of cultural education as it was a health measure. Through these personal stories, a clear pattern emerges. Romans approached oral hygiene not as an optional indulgence, but as a daily obligation tied to health, social status, and personal discipline. The inclusion of urine as a key ingredient, while shocking to modern sensibilities, reflects both practical effectiveness and the acceptance of unconventional solutions when social and cultural imperatives demanded them. Part 3 concludes with the recognition that these mundane routines, while repetitive and sometimes unpleasant, shaped the lived experiences of countless Romans. From the merchant in Rome to the soldier on the frontier, from children learning proper technique to attendants assisting wealthy citizens, oral hygiene was a consistent feature of daily life. It was a shared responsibility, a social expectation, and a marker of personal and civic identity.
As the Roman Empire progressed into the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, its citizens continued to adapt daily routines to the evolving social and medical landscape. Oral hygiene, though still largely reliant on the methods established in earlier centuries, began to show subtle changes influenced by medical writings, cultural exchange, and practical observation. In particular, the professionalization of medicine and the increasing availability of scholarly texts shaped the refinement of dental practices, demonstrating that even seemingly trivial routines were subject to broader societal developments. Roman medical practitioners such as Galen, a physician whose works would dominate European medicine for centuries, contributed significantly to the understanding of oral health. Galen emphasized the importance of balance within the body, advocating for a harmonious interaction between diet, hygiene, and general wellness. While his recommendations sometimes strayed into theoretical speculation, his writings provided a framework for considering dental care as an essential component of bodily health. Specifically, he noted that the removal of debris from the mouth could prevent not only local irritation and decay, but also broader systemic issues, including bad breath, digestive problems, and gum disease. The introduction of these medical perspectives subtly altered domestic routines. Households began to consider not only the aesthetic and social benefits of clean teeth, but also the potential health consequences of neglect. Written instructions from physicians often accompanied prescriptions for mixtures containing urine, powdered charcoal, crushed shells, and aromatic herbs. These texts suggested precise proportions, frequency of use, and timing, reflecting an early attempt at standardized hygiene. Although compliance was variable, the existence of these recommendations indicates an emerging intersection between empirical observation and domestic practice. Cultural exchange also played a role in the evolution of oral hygiene. As Rome expanded into the eastern Mediterranean and North Africa, local customs influenced Roman habits. In Egypt, natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture used for mummification, was sometimes incorporated into dental care. Similarly, Greek physicians recommended plant-based cleansers and oils, which were occasionally combined with traditional Roman mixtures. These integrations produced regional variations in technique and composition, reflecting the empire's capacity for adaptive incorporation of local knowledge. Practical adaptations were also evident in urban environments. In densely populated cities such as Rome, Ostia, and Alexandria, access to fresh water and sanitary facilities was limited. Citizens innovated by maintaining small private containers for their cleaning mixtures, minimizing contamination and optimizing effectiveness. Utensils were often carefully designated for oral use, and household manuals provided instructions for their maintenance. The interplay between resource availability and social expectation ensured that even modest households could participate in acceptable hygiene practices. Meanwhile, elite households continued to emphasize refinement and presentation. Attendants assisted with preparation, application, and monitoring, ensuring that every detail conformed to contemporary standards. Archaeological evidence, including small clay pots and specialized implements, demonstrates the attention to design, suggesting that these objects were not merely functional but also a reflection of taste and status. The presence of decorative motifs or inscriptions further indicates that oral hygiene could serve as a subtle display of wealth and sophistication. Interestingly, this period also saw the gradual questioning of certain traditional ingredients. Some medical commentators began to caution against excessive reliance on urine, noting that overuse could irritate gums or contribute to unpleasant odors if not properly rinsed. While the substance remained widely used, these observations illustrate a critical engagement with existing practices, reflecting an early form of empirical reasoning. Citizens could adjust concentrations, mix ingredients differently, or incorporate additional herbs, demonstrating that hygiene routines were not entirely static. Diet continued to influence oral care, as medical and domestic texts emphasized the connection between food and dental health. Hard or fibrous foods were encouraged for their natural abrasive properties, while excessive consumption of sweet substances was discouraged to prevent decay. The consideration of diet alongside cleansing routines indicates that Romans understood oral health as a multifaceted endeavor, encompassing both proactive cleaning and preventative measures through lifestyle choices. Social perception remained central to hygiene practices. The visibility of teeth in conversation, public appearances, and social rituals reinforced the importance of maintaining cleanliness. Writers of etiquette manuals often included discussions of acceptable hygiene, noting that neglect could signal laziness, poor upbringing, or lack of refinement. Conversely, meticulous attention to personal care, including the maintenance of bright teeth, could enhance reputation, facilitate social interactions, and even influence professional success. Children continued to be instructed in these practices from a young age, often under supervision. Parents and attendants emphasized consistency and thoroughness, ensuring that habits formed early became ingrained for life. Education in hygiene also served as an implicit moral lesson, linking discipline and daily routines with broader virtues of self-control and respect for societal norms. These teachings were reinforced through observation, repetition, and gentle correction, illustrating the interplay between domestic instruction and cultural values. Medical and philosophical perspectives occasionally intersected in the consideration of mental and physical well-being. Stoic and Epicurean thinkers emphasized moderation, routine, and care for the body as central to ethical living. By extension, maintaining clean teeth became more than a cosmetic concern. It was part of cultivating a disciplined and virtuous life. Even the use of unconventional substances, such as urine, could be rationalized as a practical solution consistent with reasoned decision-making and attention to natural efficacy. Regional differences persisted and evolved as well. In the provinces, variations in ingredients and methods reflected both availability and local cultural norms. Northern regions emphasized practicality, using twigs, ash, and locally collected urine, while Mediterranean territories experimented with aromatic additives, herbal infusions, and imported materials. These integrations produced regional variations in technique and composition, reflecting the empire's capacity for adaptive incorporation of local knowledge. By the end of this period, oral hygiene had become a complex and multi-dimensional aspect of daily life. It combined medical knowledge, cultural norms, social expectations, and practical constraints. While the methods often remained unpleasant and repetitive, their persistence over generations underscores their perceived importance. The attention to detail, regional adaptation, and integration of medical advice highlight that hygiene was both an individual responsibility and a reflection of broader societal structures. As the Roman Empire progressed into its later stages, particularly during the 3rd, 4th, and 5th century CE, the routines and practices surrounding personal hygiene, including oral care, began to experience subtle but notable transformations. Political instability, economic challenges, and social shifts affected daily life, resulting in adaptations, simplifications, and at times declines in previously established practices. While earlier centuries had emphasized refinement, discipline, and adherence to domestic standards, the pressures of a changing empire gradually reshaped these routines, including the use of unconventional substances like urine. Urban infrastructure, which had long supported sanitation and personal care, experienced varying degrees of decline in certain regions. Aqueducts, public baths, and communal latrines, once marvels of Roman engineering, required regular maintenance to remain functional. In some provincial cities, neglect or damage disrupted the steady supply of water, complicating domestic hygiene practices. Citizens relied on alternative water sources, such as wells, cisterns, or transported water, which affected their ability to maintain thorough oral cleaning routines. While wealthy households could still employ attendants in private containers to preserve their hygiene standards, many middle and lower class families faced practical challenges in sustaining previous practices. The political and economic climate further influenced hygiene habits. Periods of civil unrest, invasions, and resource shortages disrupted trade networks that had previously supplied exotic ingredients for dental care, including imported herbs and abrasives. Consequently, households adapted by simplifying their mixtures or relying more heavily on locally available components. Crushed shells, ashes, and twigs remained common, while the use of urine persisted primarily due to its availability, simplicity, and established efficacy. These adaptations reflect a pragmatic response to the changing material conditions of daily life in the later empire. Medical literature continued to inform oral hygiene, although the emphasis shifted slightly. Physicians such as Galen had laid a foundation for understanding health and cleanliness, and later commentators retained this framework. However, in practice, the rigor of daily routines often diminished. Texts recommended moderation, care in preparation, and attention to diet, but citizens facing disrupted supplies or increased workload frequently adjusted their habits. Letters from provincial administrators and household accounts reveal a more flexible approach, with cleaning occurring when convenient rather than as a strictly scheduled ritual. Social norms and expectations also evolved. While appearance and personal discipline remained important markers of respectability, the pressures of survival, labor, and civic instability shifted priorities. In some frontier towns and rural regions, the maintenance of teeth was considered less critical than securing food, shelter, and safety. Nonetheless, letters and diaries from concerned citizens indicate that even in such contexts, basic oral hygiene persisted, albeit in a simplified and often irregular form. Elite households maintained more elaborate practices, preserving the refinement of earlier centuries. Attendants continued to prepare and apply cleaning mixtures, supervise proper technique, and manage utensils and storage vessels. Clay pots for toothpaste, wooden spatulas, and other implements remained in use, sometimes adorned with decorative motifs, reflecting both functionality and aesthetic sensibilities. Wealthy citizens placed particular emphasis on presentation, especially in public appearances, where bright teeth symbolized civility, discipline, and adherence to social norms. Children's education and hygiene persisted, though often simplified. Parents and attendants taught basic techniques and emphasized consistency, but instruction was adjusted according to available resources. Emphasis on moral and social discipline remained, reflecting the continued connection between personal care and broader cultural expectations. Children observed adults, practiced routine cleaning, and internalized habits of discipline and care, ensuring that some continuity of traditional hygiene practices endured across generations. Diet remained an influential factor in oral health. Hard, fibrous foods continued to act as natural abrasives, while the consumption of sweets or overly processed substances, though less common than in later centuries, was monitored. Observations about food and dental effects appeared in household notes, medical texts, and anecdotal records. Citizens noted the relationship between diet, toothwear, and cleanliness, reflecting an ongoing awareness of the interplay between nutrition and hygiene. One notable aspect of this period was the persistence of urine as a cleaning agent, despite evolving sensibilities and the introduction of alternative substances. While some elite medical commentators recommended dilution, mixing with aromatic herbs, or periodic substitution with salt-based pastes, the core practice endured. This persistence highlights the combination of cultural tradition, perceived efficacy, and practicality that characterized Roman domestic life. Citizens were willing to tolerate unpleasantness if results were reliable and socially recognized. The decline of urban infrastructure and disruptions in trade also fostered regional diversity. In the western provinces, where political instability and economic contraction were more pronounced, citizens relied on simpler, locally sourced ingredients and abbreviated routines. In the eastern provinces, where trade networks remained more robust, access to herbs, salts, and imported materials allowed households to maintain more elaborate practices. These differences illustrate the adaptive capacity of Roman culture, even in the face of systemic pressures. Military contexts offer additional insight. Soldiers stationed in frontier zones often lacked access to traditional ingredients and facilities. Letters from legionaries describe improvisation, including the use of locally sourced ashes, twigs, and urine from communal containers. Despite harsh conditions, attention to dental cleanliness persisted, demonstrating the social and practical importance attached to hygiene. Officers observed that soldiers who maintained visible cleanliness, including bright teeth, were regarded as disciplined and reliable, a subtle but meaningful reinforcement of social norms within military structures. By the end of this period, oral hygiene had evolved from highly structured, elite-influenced routines into a spectrum of practices shaped by social, economic, and environmental factors. The central principles, cleaning teeth, applying effective substances, and maintaining appearance, remained intact, but the methods, frequency, and rigor of application reflected the broader context of late Roman life. What had once been a uniform practice became differentiated across regions, social classes, and household types. Despite these transformations, the cultural and psychological importance of oral hygiene persisted. Citizens understood that clean teeth were linked to social perception, personal discipline, and health. The adaptation and simplification of routines demonstrate the resilience of cultural norms, even in periods of decline and upheaval. In this sense, the story of Roman toothpaste and oral care reflects the broader dynamics of the empire itself: continuity, adaptation, and the intersection of tradition with practical necessity. As the Western Roman Empire declined in the 5th century CE, the routines and practices that had characterized Roman domestic life, including oral hygiene, underwent significant transformations. The collapse of central authority, disruptions in trade, and the fragmentation of urban infrastructure contributed to changes in daily life, forcing citizens to adapt or abandon long-established habits. In particular, the use of substances like urine for teeth cleaning, which had been widespread and socially sanctioned, faced practical, cultural, and environmental challenges during this transitional period. Urban centers, once vibrant hubs of sanitation and hygiene, experienced partial decay. Aqueducts fell into disrepair, public baths became less accessible, and latrine maintenance suffered. While elite households retained some facilities, middle and lower-class citizens encountered reduced availability of clean water and functional infrastructure. These conditions limited access to previously standard cleaning routines and necessitated improvisation. Some citizens reverted to simpler abrasives, such as twigs, ashes, and crushed shells, while others maintained basic washing practices without the application of specialized substances. The collapse of trade networks further impacted oral hygiene. Ingredients that had been imported from across the Mediterranean, including herbs, salts, and minerals used for teeth whitening, became less accessible. This scarcity reinforced reliance on locally available materials, though the use of urine persisted in some areas due to its universal availability and recognized effectiveness. Letters and household notes from rural communities in Gaul and northern Italy describe continued use of urine, often combined with locally sourced herbs or ashes to improve taste or texture. Medical literature of the period also underwent transformation. The decline of centralized educational institutions and the reduction of professional physicians in certain regions meant that earlier texts, such as those by Galen or Scribonius Largus, remained influential but were less widely disseminated. Monastic scribes and scholars preserved portions of these works, particularly in ecclesiastical centers, but practical guidance for daily hygiene was often simplified or lost. In effect, medical advice became more theoretical than applied, leaving ordinary citizens to rely on tradition, observation, and local knowledge for guidance. Social structures also shifted. The hierarchical organization of Roman society, with its emphasis on urban civility, civic duty, and status, gradually gave way to localized feudal and rural structures. In this context, appearance and social signaling through hygiene took on different meanings. While elite households continued to emphasize cleanliness as a mark of refinement, ordinary citizens focused on functional hygiene rather than social display. Clean teeth were valued, but the elaborate application of mixtures or supervised routines diminished, reflecting broader social and economic priorities. Children continued to be instructed in hygiene, although the context was less formalized. Parents, grandparents, and local elders taught basic cleaning techniques using simple, locally sourced materials. The connection between discipline, moral instruction, and personal care persisted, albeit in a simplified form. Observations from early medieval household records indicate that children were encouraged to clean their teeth to avoid discomfort, maintain acceptable appearance within the community, and preserve health, though the procedures were far less regimented than in earlier Roman times. Dietary considerations remained relevant to oral hygiene. Early medieval diets, with greater reliance on coarse grains, vegetables, and minimally processed foods, provided some natural abrasive benefits to teeth. Consumption of sweetened foods, though less widespread than in later centuries, was limited, reducing instances of decay caused by sugar. Observers noted that the physical characteristics of food contributed to tooth wear, and this awareness continued to influence simple domestic cleaning routines. Military contexts during this period revealed the persistence of practical hygiene under challenging circumstances. Soldiers stationed on frontiers or engaged in conflicts often lacked access to refined cleaning ingredients. Improvisation remained common, with twigs, ashes, and local herbs supplementing or replacing previously standardized mixtures. Letters from commanders emphasized the functional importance of maintaining personal cleanliness, including dental hygiene for health and morale, rather than as a social marker. Despite simplification, the use of urine for dental cleaning persisted in some regions. It remained valued for its chemical properties, particularly the ammonia content, which effectively removed debris and whitened teeth. Monastic writings occasionally reference the use of urine and other traditional substances, indicating continuity of practice in religious and rural communities. In these contexts, the persistence of urine-based dental care reflects both practical efficacy and cultural continuity, bridging the Roman past with early medieval life. Philosophical and moral attitudes toward hygiene also evolved. While earlier Roman thought connected personal care to civic virtue and social refinement, early medieval perspectives emphasized practicality, piety, and moderation. Cleanliness was encouraged as a reflection of personal discipline, health, and moral virtue, though social display was less central. The alignment of daily routines, including oral care, with broader ethical and religious principles, highlights the integration of hygiene into the moral framework of early medieval life. Regional variations became increasingly pronounced. In Western Europe, disrupted infrastructure and limited trade led to simplified routines, whereas in the Eastern Mediterranean, where trade and urban centers remained relatively robust, more elaborate practices persisted. For example, in Byzantine territories, access to imported herbs and salts allowed continuity of more refined methods, while in rural Gaul or Britain, teeth cleaning often relied solely on twigs, ash, or basic mixtures. These differences underscore the role of local resources, cultural context, and economic conditions in shaping hygiene practices. By the end of this transitional period, oral hygiene had become a patchwork of traditions, adaptations, and simplifications. While some households preserved the elaborate routines of the Roman past, most citizens adopted practical and flexible approaches, balancing health, convenience, and available resources. The continued, albeit reduced, use of urine for dental cleaning illustrates the endurance of effective traditional methods, even amid social and economic transformation.
As Europe moved through the medieval period, roughly from the 6th to the 14th centuries CE, the practices of oral hygiene evolved under new social, cultural, and technological influences. The collapse of centralized Roman governance in the West meant that much of the infrastructure, knowledge, and professional guidance that had supported Roman hygiene routines, including teeth cleaning with substances like urine, became less accessible. Nonetheless, many practices persisted through continuity in households, monasteries, and urban centers, even as new innovations began to emerge. In rural regions, oral hygiene remained largely pragmatic. Household notes, monastic records, and sporadic letters indicate that citizens continued to rely on local resources for teeth cleaning. Twigs, abrasive powders made from ash or crushed shells, and occasionally urine or other alkaline substances were used to maintain basic dental cleanliness. The methods were simple and functional, emphasizing removal of debris over aesthetic refinement. Parents taught children these practices, reinforcing both cleanliness and discipline as part of daily life. Monastic communities played a critical role in preserving knowledge of hygiene. Monks and nuns maintained libraries containing Roman medical texts, agricultural manuals, and other instructional works. These texts included recommendations for dental care, often emphasizing practical remedies that relied on accessible materials. While some guidance, such as the precise measurements of herbs or the timing of routines, was largely theoretical in many regions, the manuscripts ensured that the principles of teeth cleaning persisted through literacy and scholarly preservation. Urban centers, where trade and population density allowed continued access to diverse ingredients, retained more elaborate routines. Merchants, artisans, and minor elites had access to imported salts, herbs, and abrasives, allowing them to maintain practices reminiscent of earlier Roman methods. Clay pots, wooden spatulas, and other implements remained in use, though their decoration and refinement reflected both practical use and modest displays of social status. Hygiene routines were still tied to appearance, but the emphasis on civic duty or public display had diminished relative to Roman times. Diet continued to influence dental health. Coarse breads, grains, and vegetables provided natural abrasive action, while limited availability of sweetened or processed foods meant that decay caused by sugar was relatively rare. Observers noted that teeth wear was often due to fibrous and unprocessed food rather than chemical erosion or neglect. Citizens adjusted cleaning routines accordingly, sometimes using abrasive powders more aggressively to compensate for dietary effects. The gradual emergence of new methods is evident in medical and household texts from the period. Some physicians and apothecaries recommended rinsing the mouth with herbal infusions, salt water, or vinegar solutions as alternatives to older substances like urine. These alternatives were less offensive in odor and taste, though their chemical efficacy was variable. They became increasingly popular among literate urban populations and in communities with access to imported ingredients. Despite this, traditional substances remained in use, particularly in rural households where alternatives were impractical. Social and cultural attitudes toward hygiene also shifted. While the early medieval period retained elements of moral and ethical emphasis on cleanliness, the broader preoccupation with social display diminished. Oral hygiene became primarily a practical concern, preventing discomfort, maintaining health, and adhering to household norms. Nevertheless, individuals with access to imported materials and skilled attendants occasionally used dental care to signal refinement, echoing Roman traditions in a more limited and localized form. Children's instruction in oral hygiene continued as part of household education. Parents and elders emphasized consistent cleaning, the avoidance of harmful substances, and moderation in the use of abrasive materials. Monastic instruction often reinforced these practices with moral overtones, presenting cleanliness as part of disciplined living. In addition to practical benefits, these routines encouraged attention to bodily care as an aspect of personal responsibility. Military and frontier contexts retained continuity in practical hygiene. Soldiers stationed in castles, garrisons, or border regions improvised using available materials. Twigs, ash, salt, and sometimes urine continued to serve as cleaning agents. Letters and logistical records indicate that commanders recognized the importance of hygiene for health, morale, and operational efficiency, though social display was largely irrelevant in these environments. Functional cleanliness remained the primary concern. Regional variations persisted and became more pronounced.
In Western Europe, rural and frontier regions relied heavily on locally available ingredients and simplified routines. In Italy, southern France, and parts of the eastern Mediterranean, urban centers with continued trade maintained more elaborate practices, incorporating imported herbs, salts, and powders into daily care. This regional diversity reflects both resource availability and cultural continuity, as well as the adaptive capacity of medieval households to preserve essential practices amid social and economic change. The persistence of older methods, including the use of urine, illustrates the balance between tradition and innovation. Practical efficacy and cultural familiarity ensured the survival of certain substances, even as emerging alternatives gradually gained favor. Households often employed multiple approaches, combining traditional abrasives with rinses, herbal infusions, or salt solutions. This hybridization of methods exemplifies the pragmatic approach of medieval citizens, blending continuity with gradual adaptation. By the late medieval period, roughly the 13th and 14th centuries, there was an increasing interest in health, appearance, and social perception. Manuals for merchants, minor elites, and literate households began to reflect broader concerns with aesthetic presentation, emphasizing the benefits of clean, bright teeth. These texts recommended rinses, mild abrasives, and in some cases, imported powders for whitening. Though urine remained in limited use, especially in rural areas, urban and elite populations increasingly adopted alternatives that were more palatable and socially acceptable.
The Renaissance, beginning in the 14th century in Italy and spreading across Europe over the next 2 centuries, marked a period of significant cultural, scientific, and technological transformation. While this era is widely celebrated for its advancements in art, literature, and humanism, it also influenced the more mundane aspects of daily life, including personal hygiene. Oral care, in particular, began to undergo gradual changes as knowledge of health, chemistry, and materials improved. During the Renaissance, medical and scientific scholarship flourished. Physicians and apothecaries built upon the preserved knowledge of the classical world, including Roman medical texts, but increasingly incorporated empirical observation, experimentation, and chemical innovations. The chemical properties of substances used for dental care became better understood, and this growing knowledge began to influence daily routines. Traditional ingredients, such as ashes, crushed shells, and even urine, continued in limited use, particularly in rural or less wealthy households. However, alternatives gradually became more widespread, especially among urban elites. One significant development was the increasing use of herbal and mineral-based powders for cleaning and whitening teeth. Apothecaries offered tooth powders made from ingredients such as salt, powdered charcoal, burnt eggshells, myrrh, and various aromatic herbs. These mixtures were often milder in odor and taste compared to urine-based pastes, making them more socially acceptable. Manuals from the period recommend careful preparation and application, emphasizing the benefits of thorough cleaning without excessive abrasion, reflecting an evolving understanding of oral health. The role of appearance also became more pronounced during the Renaissance. Personal grooming was associated not only with health, but also with social status, refinement, and attractiveness. In urban centers such as Florence, Venice, and Paris, citizens took pride in bright, clean teeth as part of their overall presentation. While the Roman emphasis on civic virtue had diminished, Renaissance society increasingly linked personal care with fashion, social perception, and self-expression. Consequently, more palatable alternatives to urine gained popularity, particularly among the educated and wealthy. Renaissance physicians and writers began explicitly discussing oral care in published works. For example, encyclopedic texts and household manuals included detailed instructions on cleaning teeth, maintaining gums, and preventing decay. These recommendations incorporated empirical observation and chemical reasoning, advising on abrasive materials, rinses, and the timing of cleaning routines. The emphasis shifted toward practical health benefits and aesthetic results rather than mere adherence to tradition. Urban households increasingly employed specialized tools for dental care. Small brushes, often made with horsehair or bristles attached to wooden handles, appeared alongside containers for powders and pastes. Clay pots and small boxes were used to store ingredients, reflecting both organization and hygiene. These implements allowed more precise and comfortable application of cleaning substances, and their appearance often reflected household taste and refinement. Children continued to be instructed in proper techniques as education and domestic training emphasized discipline, hygiene, and moral propriety. Teachers and parents encouraged consistent cleaning, moderation in abrasive use, and attention to diet. The role of food remained relevant, with fibrous vegetables, coarse bread, and minimally processed grains providing natural abrasive action. Sweetened foods were still limited compared to modern times, but awareness of their effects on dental health began to emerge in household and medical writings. Military and travel contexts also adapted to changing materials and knowledge. Soldiers, merchants, and travelers could access apothecary powders, salt rinses, and herbal solutions, though they often improvised with locally available ingredients. Observers noted that individuals who maintained visible cleanliness, including bright teeth, were perceived as disciplined and reliable, echoing the social reinforcement seen in Roman and medieval contexts. Despite these advancements, the use of urine persisted in limited settings. Rural communities and households with limited access to apothecary products continued traditional practices, valuing the effectiveness of ammonia-rich substances. However, in urban centers and among elites, urine-based dental care declined sharply, replaced by powders, rinses, and early brush-like implements. This shift illustrates the combination of chemical understanding, social expectations, and cultural refinement that guided the transformation of oral hygiene. Cultural attitudes toward health and hygiene also evolved. Renaissance humanism emphasized the care of the body as a reflection of rationality, education, and virtue. Clean teeth became part of a broader philosophy of personal refinement, linking health, appearance, and social behavior. Manuals and treatises presented oral care not merely as a practical routine, but as an essential component of disciplined, civilized life. By the early modern period, roughly the 16th and 17th centuries, oral hygiene had increasingly shifted towards standardized powders, early brushes, and rinses, signaling the decline of urine as a common cleaning agent. While traditional practices persisted in some regions, particularly rural or isolated areas, the combination of chemical innovation, trade, and evolving social norms gradually phased out the older methods. Hygiene became both a marker of social status and a personal health measure, reflecting broader changes in European society.
By the 18th century, oral hygiene began to take a more modern form, influenced by scientific curiosity, industrial developments, and social changes. The once dominant use of unconventional substances, such as urine, had largely disappeared in urban Europe, replaced by more standardized products designed for taste, ease of use, and effectiveness. The transformation was gradual, rooted in a growing awareness of health, the chemical properties of cleaning agents, and social expectations around personal appearance. Commercial tooth powder emergence. One of the first major innovations was the rise of commercially available tooth powders. Apothecaries and chemists in cities such as London, Paris, and Vienna began to produce powders consisting of chalk, soap, pulverized herbs, and mild abrasives. These powders were marketed to the urban middle class as convenient and refined alternatives to homemade mixtures. Instructions for use often appeared on printed labels, marking one of the earliest examples of mass consumer guidance in oral hygiene. The ingredients reflected both scientific experimentation and practicality. Chalk served as a mild abrasive to remove debris, while herbal additives such as myrrh, mint, and sage provided fragrance and slight antiseptic properties. Soap was sometimes included to enhance cleaning, though care had to be taken to avoid excessive abrasion or gum irritation. Tooth powders were packaged in small boxes or tins, making them portable and easier to store than the earlier clay pots and wooden spatulas used for traditional pastes. Brushing with bristles. Alongside powders, the concept of a dedicated toothbrush became increasingly common. Early brushes, often imported from China, featured animal hair bristles, typically boar, affixed to handles made from bone, ivory, or wood. The design was rudimentary but effective, allowing more consistent application of powder and mechanical cleaning of teeth. By the late 18th century, local manufacturers in Europe began producing their own bristle brushes, contributing to wider adoption. Instructions for brushing became part of printed manuals and etiquette guides, emphasizing gentle, systematic cleaning. Unlike Roman or medieval methods, which often relied heavily on abrasive chemicals or urine, brushing with powders prioritized mechanical cleaning combined with mild chemical agents. This marked a significant shift in philosophy, from tolerance of harsh substances to a balance of effectiveness and comfort. Influence of scientific understanding. The 18th and 19th centuries also saw growing scientific interest in health and hygiene. Physicians and chemists began studying dental decay, bacteria, and the chemistry of tooth cleaning, although knowledge of microbes would not fully develop until the late 19th century. Early experiments explored the relative effectiveness of abrasives, antiseptics, and natural substances, laying the foundation for modern toothpaste. Social elites were often the first to adopt these methods, but the diffusion of knowledge through books, pamphlets, and advertisements gradually brought them to a wider audience. Dietary shifts and social factors. Dietary changes influenced oral health. The increased consumption of sugar, imported from colonies, led to greater prevalence of cavities and dental decay, particularly among urban populations. This contrasted with earlier periods, when limited sugar consumption naturally reduced decay. As a result, preventative care became more necessary, driving innovation in powders, brushes, and rinses. Social norms around appearance, hygiene, and respectability further motivated citizens to maintain clean teeth, reinforcing adoption of emerging technologies. Professional dentistry emergence. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, dentistry began to professionalize. Barbers, apothecaries, and general physicians had long performed rudimentary dental procedures, but formal training, specialized tools, and scientific principles began to emerge. Dentists offered advice on tooth cleaning, diet, and prevention of decay, often recommending tooth powders or early forms of paste for daily care. This professionalization reinforced the transition from traditional domestic methods to standardized practices informed by science and commerce. Rinses and early mouthwashes. Rinsing the mouth also became more common. Solutions containing alcohol, vinegar, or herbal infusions were promoted to freshen breath and reduce debris. While still rudimentary compared to modern antiseptics, these rinses reflected a shift toward chemical and sensory considerations in oral care. Citizens increasingly valued not just cleaning teeth, but also achieving a fresh, socially acceptable breath, a concern rarely documented in earlier Roman or medieval sources. Persistence and decline of old practices. Despite innovations, some traditional practices lingered in rural and isolated regions. Abrasive powders, twigs, or herbal infusions continued to supplement emerging methods. However, by the 19th century, urine-based cleaning and harsh homemade pastes had all but disappeared in urban Europe. The combination of consumer products, scientific reasoning, and social expectation effectively replaced the older methods, standardizing oral hygiene in ways that closely resemble modern practices. Conclusion of the period. By the end of the 19th century, European citizens, particularly in urban areas, had largely transitioned to using commercial tooth powders, bristle brushes, and rinses. The conceptual shift was significant. Oral hygiene was no longer merely a social expectation or traditional routine. It became a scientifically informed, standardized, and widely accessible practice. This period set the stage for the invention of modern toothpaste, fluoridation, and the widespread adoption of oral health as an essential aspect of personal care. The 20th century represents the final major transformation in the history of oral hygiene, bridging centuries of evolving practices into the fully modern concept of dental care. This era saw the rise of industrial production, mass marketing, scientific research, and public health campaigns, all of which shaped how ordinary people maintained their teeth. By this period, the methods of ancient Romans, using urine, ashes, and twigs, had been largely abandoned, replaced by standardized, convenient, and scientifically informed approaches. Toothpaste tubes and mass production. One of the most significant innovations of the 20th century was the introduction of toothpaste in collapsible tubes, inspired by the design of artist paint tubes. In the late 19th century, toothpaste was commonly sold in jars or powders, requiring scooping and mixing. Tubes simplified use, increased convenience, and improved hygiene by preventing contamination. By the early 1900s, major companies began producing commercially branded toothpastes in tubes, marketed for effectiveness, taste, and social appeal. Mass production allowed toothpaste to reach a broad audience. In urban centers and rural areas alike, citizens could purchase standardized, flavored, and chemically optimized products. Ingredients such as mild abrasives, fluoride compounds, and antiseptics were incorporated to prevent decay, strengthen enamel, and freshen breath. This marked a departure from homemade remedies and traditional powders, standardizing dental care in a way that was both effective and socially normalized. The role of fluoride. Scientific research further transformed oral hygiene during the 20th century. In the 1940s and 1950s, studies demonstrated the effectiveness of fluoride in preventing dental cavities. Public health campaigns began promoting fluoridated water and toothpaste, a practice now recognized as one of the most significant preventative measures in dental care history. This innovation highlights a critical shift. Hygiene was no longer merely about appearance or tradition, it became an evidence-based health practice. Electric and advanced toothbrushes. Alongside toothpaste innovation, toothbrush design evolved rapidly. The traditional bristle brush persisted, but electric toothbrushes were introduced mid-century, providing more consistent cleaning through mechanical motion. Improvements in bristle materials, handle ergonomics, and accessibility made brushing easier, more comfortable, and more effective. The combination of modern brushes and fluoridated toothpaste represented a scientific culmination of centuries of experimentation, observation, and adaptation. Public health and education. Education campaigns reinforced the importance of daily brushing, flossing, and dental visits. Schools, medical offices, and government agencies promoted oral hygiene as a key component of overall health. Unlike in Roman times, where appearance, civic status, or social discipline drove cleaning, 20th century practices emphasized health outcomes, disease prevention, and longevity. Parents taught children structured routines, dentists advised on technique, and mass media reinforced the cultural expectation that oral care was essential for everyone. Marketing and social influence. The rise of consumer culture also shaped perceptions of hygiene. Toothpaste advertising highlighted whiteness, freshness, and attractiveness, linking oral care to beauty and social confidence. Commercial campaigns created aspirational narratives, portraying clean teeth as a mark of refinement, youth, and professionalism.
In this way, social perception, an important driver of hygiene since Roman times, remained influential, now amplified through mass media and marketing. Global standardization. By the late 20th century, oral hygiene practices had become remarkably standardized across much of the developed world. Twice-daily brushing with fluoridated toothpaste, routine dental visits, and the use of supplemental products such as floss, mouthwash, and gum cleaners formed the core of personal dental care. While regional variations persisted in some areas, the widespread availability of scientifically formulated products combined with education campaigns made consistent oral hygiene a global norm. Modern scientific understanding. Advances in microbiology, chemistry, and dental medicine reinforced evidence-based approaches. Research identified the bacterial causes of cavities, the protective role of enamel, and the importance of plaque removal. Toothpaste formulas were optimized for both mechanical cleaning and chemical protection, including fluoride, antimicrobials, and desensitizing agents. Scientific understanding transformed oral care from tradition and observation into a precise, replicable practice with measurable outcomes. A cultural and historical reflection. The evolution of oral hygiene from ancient Rome to the modern era demonstrates continuity, adaptation, and innovation. Practices once reliant on urine, ashes, and twigs evolved through centuries of experimentation, social expectation, and scientific inquiry. Each period, from Roman meticulousness through medieval pragmatism, Renaissance refinement, and early modern commercialization, contributed lessons that informed the modern approach. Modern dental care represents the culmination of thousands of years of human experience. While citizens no longer use urine or crushed shells for cleaning, the core objectives, clean teeth, prevention of decay, and social acceptability, remain consistent across time. The history of oral hygiene reflects broader patterns in human culture, practical problem-solving, integration of new knowledge, and the interplay of social norms with health. Conclusion: the full circle. From the Roman merchant carefully stirring his clay pot of crushed shells and urine, to the Renaissance citizen brushing with imported powders, to the modern individual squeezing fluoridated toothpaste from a tube, oral hygiene has evolved in form, technique, and purpose. Modern routines are informed by science, facilitated by technology, and reinforced by culture, yet they echo the same concerns that motivated humans for millennia: health, comfort, appearance, and social acceptance. The story of oral hygiene is in many ways a story of human adaptation. Each era confronted available materials, knowledge, and social expectations, creating practices that were effective within their context. The persistence of cleaning teeth, regardless of method, underscores the fundamental human desire for self-care and social respectability, a thread running from antiquity to today. Thus, the 20,000-word history of dental care concludes with the recognition that what may seem mundane, scrubbing teeth daily, is actually the product of centuries of ingenuity, observation, and cultural continuity. From Roman urine pastes to modern fluoridated toothpaste, humans have consistently sought solutions to maintain cleanliness, health, and social respect, reflecting both practicality and the enduring human concern with appearance and well-being.